All right, great.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask so what was like the craziest idea that you pursued
In my work?
in your work? Yeah, with the Periphery, we haven't even gotten there yet, but Brandon with Periphery, that's your whole gig, your media company and
Mhm.
everything. But yeah, I would love to hear like the craziest idea that you've pursued.
Well, I mean, the first thing that pops into my head is male modeling.
Whoa.
Yeah. In fact, I think my first exposure on camera is my wrist.
I was gonna say, I feel like you're a hand model.
I was a wrist model, dude. I was doing the watches on Shop NBC.
You got signed up for that too? You got passed and everything?
Well, so I was in a modeling agency in town, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we need people to be on Shop." Do you guys know that Shop NBC is in town? It's in Eden Prairie.
No,
I
I
have
did not.
no idea.
They might have renamed it something.
Okay.
In fact, I'm pretty sure they did right around the time I did this, and this was the 2009, because I remember I was working when Brett Favre was torching the Cowboys in the playoffs, in 2009 for the Vikings, right?
Yep.
And because I was working when that game was going on. But back then, yeah, they would sign me up for shifts for about $18 an hour. And I would go down there, and they'd have me wear a suit, and so they'd have the host trying to sell you stuff on the shopping network, so it's all high energy, and they're giving all these exaggerated claims about how indestructible these watches are, and, you know, the one guy would, like, rub it against the table and say, "See, no scratches," you know? And then, every once in a while, they'd be, like, whispering at me in my ear or something, or maybe the runner would just tell me, "Hey, take your place, they're going to go to you." And then I'd have to hit my mark and get my wrist out there nice and...
Yeah, flex the forearms
know?
a little bit.
Yeah. And the watches were always big and floppy, and I have, like, thin wrists, so I'd, like, put 2 fingers behind the little secret of the pros. Oh, and another secret is that you wear the watch upside down, because otherwise the 12 would be down here.
Yep. 'Cause
Right?
you're holding it that way.
Right? But for the camera, you want the 12 to be up here. So you wear the watch upside down, and then you just kind of...
Rotate.
And then you do a slight little rotate.
Get it to shimmer and glimmer.
So one shot is like a 3/4 shot from down, like my knees or thighs up to over my head, and for that shot, you know, you just got to look like, that's right, this is my watch, and you'll look like me too if you wear it. And then the other shot is like the zoom in on the wrist.
Sure.
You know, so I did that.
Damn.
Yeah. So
That is like
but I actually went out to LA for some
for wrist modeling.
no. I would have already had more luck. I went out there trying to... It was like this cattle call, like big modeling convention, where me and every other person across the country who thinks they got a shot in the dark can go out there and get signed. You know, it's like some stars in your eyes kind of thing, where they, you know, 99 out of 100 people aren't going to get anywhere, but the few successes that do get through are the ones that they showcase and say, "Hey, look, this could be you next year. Or this could be you." And I went out there, and you know, the reason why that was a crazy idea wasn't because, like, one can't do it. It's just because of where I was at the time, and in my early 20s, I was just not in a great place with my life. So it was addiction and alcoholism and all that, like, dark time, and so it made that pursuit just a mess.
Exhausting.
Honestly.
Yeah.
It was just unsustainable, unfeasible for me at that time. I was just not in a great place.
Yeah, you got to have some major preparation just to go out into LA.
Yeah.
I mean, that city will eat you up and spit you out immediately. So we've heard. That's why we're trying to lay the foundation with the back pocket to eventually get there, because we've heard other people are there that are doing some cool things.
I've heard that about YouTube channels.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's... So I got a YouTube channel, The Periphery, and it's a bit of a YouTube desert in the Twin Cities. There are some. I'm part of a couple of different YouTube meetup groups, but the one rarely meets anymore, and the other one I've never met with at all. So it's... But I know a few people. I know a gal, she does a makeup tutorial channel, and another gal, she'll do hair. And so you sort of have... Another guy does reviews of outdoor gear. So it's kind of the review industry here, yeah.
Single shot
YouTube
camera.
Channel. Yeah. But not a lot. Whereas I had a friend who said, "Hey, my buddy from LA is going to be up in the Twin Cities. You should meet him, talk about YouTube." And I did. And he's like, "Oh, yeah, my friends do this." So, like, there's a whole it sounds to me like at least there's a whole community of like a real big community of like YouTubers, and then they just feed off that energy off each other and probably collaborate and things like that, and then it just kind of helps the whole community rise up.
Oh yeah.
Whereas here, I mean, there's advantages too to being in a smaller market. There's not a lot of people going around interviewing people. I was able to go into the tent city and film a documentary, and it wasn't like there was 20 other people there with cameras trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, let's freaking. I want to, before we jump right into the wall, I want to touch on what exactly is the Periphery. How'd you come up with it?
Yeah.
Kind of, I would love to hear the story behind it.
Sure. Well, I try to come up with. I always knew I was good at coming up with, like, because you see you see a story in the news, and you might have a take on it. You might have an interpretation of really what's happening there. Like, and I always thought I had one that was a little bit different, especially these days where everything is just so far to the right or so far to the left, and you only get very far if you it seems like if you bash the other side, if you finger point, there's not a whole lot of constructive centrist or at least you don't have to have a centrist position, but I find relief and insight in understanding where both
parties, left, right.
Yeah, where they're both coming from. There's truth to both. That's why they both exist. And then I would try to go beyond that. Okay, given there's truth to the conservatives, given that there's truth coming from the liberals, what now, right? So I always try to take it that extra step further. And so I try to come up with a name. And it wasn't just takes on social issues. It would also be stories. I would do like interviews with people that were not seen, like homeless, or let's hear this ice fishing story from my grandfather, right? There's stories that are a bit from the side, people who might be a bit marginalized, the everyday stuff that we might ordinarily miss, and then perspectives on an issue or what's happening in the world that people might not see or think of themselves. And so my one buddy said, "You're like the seventh side of the dice. You're like the, you're like the little extra." And I thought of all these different. Man, I racked my brain about coming up with the perfect name over and over and over again. And I remember one idea I had was deeper inquiry, and it's like, okay, but that's hard to say, and it's just not gonna be very catchy. I don't remember how I came up with this, but I remember I was at my restaurant waiting tables, and I thought of the Periphery. And I don't know how. I don't know what made that idea, just that light bulb go off. I have no idea. It did, and I thought, okay, and I looked it up, and it was not taken, theperiphery.com. And as interesting as the story of how I bought theperiphery.com, and then I ventured into the world of online real estate, if that's the term.
Oh yeah, because you can make a lot of the BackPocket.com was what,
$3,300.
$3,300. Yeah.
We had to pivot.
We didn't buy that.
First thing we had to do with the BackPocket, pivot.
Pivot.
Just like we
New
wanted
name.
BackPocket.com. Now we got to go to yourbackpockets.com if we want something free. Then we pivoted again to just the BackPocketPodcast.com.
I added the
There you
Periphery.
go.
Well,
The
Periphery's a band I hadn't heard of.
Okay.
And when I first contacted the broker, the real estate agency, company, whatever you want to call them,
The domain, yeah.
squatter, I don't know, however you want to term them.
They are squatters.
I respect the business. I mean, it's not free to host all these domains, and they have to buy them year after year and sell. And they have a huge volume, because think of how many you can come up with, and then they just go off and buy those. But then they turn around and times 500 it. They charge way more than they pay, of course. But that's how they. I assume there's some sort of business model that makes it within the realm of reason. It just seems weird because they get it for $15 and then they sell it for 4 figures. I called them up, and the guy, I think he was a salesperson. He said, "Okay, are you the band Periphery out of Boston?" I think they're out of Boston. I go, no, that's not me. Because if I was, I think he was gonna be like, "Oh yeah, you're a big rock band. I'm gonna charge you a lot more." But he said, "Okay, I'll tell you what. It's $1,100. So how about you give me like 1,000, and then I'm gonna send you a link to these. I I forgot the brand of shoe. Here are these shoes that I really want.
Why shoes?
So just buy these shoes and send them to me, and I'll charge you only $1,000 for the domain. And I was like, that sounds shady, dude. I'm sorry, I just can't do that. I just can't do it. No deal. And then he came back and said, all right, just have it for $1,000. So I bought it for $1,000. I put it on a credit card. I remember I was substitute teaching at the time, and I was on my school lunch break when I bought that domain.
No way.
Theperiphery.com, yeah.
What year was that?
I suppose that was like 2012, 2013. I don't know.
Wow.
Just a shot in the dark.
I've always wondered what substitute teachers are doing on their free time.
No, it was actually like 2015, I think, because I was back from... All right, I don't remember. It's weird how the years get blended together, but that is what they do on their free time. They do whatever they want.
They start businesses.
When they have prep hour, which is when an ordinary teacher would spend it like preparing for class, I'm on the internet probably. I mean, let's just face it, right? That's probably what most subs do.
That's awesome, man. So 4 years ago, you built this thing.
My guess is that he was a salesperson and thought he could get a commission and a sweet pair of shoes.
Yeah.
That's my guess.
But hey.
I was thinking he had some the website was going to steal your information. Like you plugged in your email address and something else, and they're just going to get into your computer and take everything.
Boy, the way he made it sound, although he did provide the link, so maybe it was like a phishing thing. But it seemed like, here's the link to Amazon of the shoes I want. So just get me these shoes, send them to me, and then show me the receipt that it's coming to me, and then I'll just give you the domain for a reduced rate.
Dude, this guy maybe he's just having too much fun.
It was weird.
Yeah, it's very weird.
I just thought, this is the Wild West. Someone might just get a wild idea like that and say, okay, if I can get a free pair of shoes out of the deal. Maybe he just loves shoes. I have no idea. I just remember thinking about, what a strange industry where your product does not
relate to what you're selling.
Well, the product doesn't.
It's not tangible.
It doesn't expire, right?
The domains.
Yeah, if you sell food, you got to hurry up and get rid of it, or it's gonna go bad. Or if you even have real estate, you got to keep paying taxes on that. So there's expense to just having it. So there's incentive to flip and to get rid of. But with domains, the incentive isn't very high.
The incentive is almost holding on to it, hoping that your domain and the SEO behind it, the optimization on search engines, increases naturally.
Yeah.
Just like a Kawhi Leonard rookie card would skyrocket after he wins the NBA Finals.
Yeah, or if he was a high school ball player and you just bought KawhiLeonard.com and then he made it big, and then it's like that's like picking a good stock,
Exactly. Stuff like that.
Crazy. Yeah. So it's a whole different. I thought that was a fun little world to jump into.
Very.
Okay, I think it would have been like 2012, 13. We'll just go back saying that. Sorry.
That's crazy. So you've had it for around 5-6 years. You're saying in the ballpark.
Yes.
And that's when you started the YouTube page as well.
Yeah, it was more travel than anything at first.
Okay.
So I brought my book in called Life Learned Abroad: Lessons on Humanity from China, and it's a big book. It's an impressive size. That's because there's a lot of photos in there. It's meant to be, let the stories do a lot of the telling, or let the photos do a lot of the storytelling, and then I'll just provide the text to fill in the rest, and also the concepts that living in a foreign land can bring to the surface. So ideas like how they treat animals versus how most people where I live, where I'm from, treat animals, and then you can kind of triangulate an issue. Like if you have two cultures, like with education or how they do relationships or protests. You watch a protest in the U.S., you watch a protest in China, which I've done, and then you get a better idea of the idea of protest just in general, because now you have 2 points of reference.
2 data points, two perspectives.
Yeah. So the whole triangle thing probably doesn't really work, but you get what I'm saying. Like you kind of have 2 perspectives from which to draw on and better understand this idea. So that's why the book is called what it is, Life Learned Abroad: Lessons on Humanity from China, because there are these lessons on humanity. Like, what does it mean to be free? Yes, in China they have a bubble over the people that restricts speech and religion and the things that we consider big, important things. But it's a lot easier there just to park your car someplace and not worry about it. If you're not wearing your seatbelt, it's not as big a deal. All right, no one's going to stop you if you look 17 and you're smoking. No one's going to stop you if you're 16 and walk into a bar. So like the little things are you're more free, I found, in China. Whereas the big things, you're less free. And so, you know, to kind of reflect on that was really interesting. And so the book has those essays featured throughout on these different big issues. And then a lot of it is just photographs of where I am, who I'm meeting, who I'm interviewing.
Yeah, I'd love to tap into that just a tad. Like, what was is it like a cool story or moment that was very rewarding for you during your time there? How long were you there for, by the way?
Easily the most rewarding part was the very end, which makes for a great ending into the book. I traveled for 3 weeks at the end. They were very kind to me at the school I was teaching English at. That's the job that got me over there. And I was there 11 months. 10 months of teaching from the regular school year from like August to June.
Mm-hmm.
And then in July, I was able, they said, we'll give you another month of visa for your, you know, to explore or whatever. I was like, oh, thank you. And then I was able to travel throughout July, and I traveled around the interior of the country. And I just took my Lonely Planet, and I looked up things I wanted to do and or what I could do. And I found this martial arts school in the mountains of central China, Wudongshan. Shan is the word for mountain, and it's in central China. I don't remember the mountain range, but it's supposedly where Tai Chi originated, and Tai Chi is that slow, rhythmic.
Yeah,
right?
like you're an airbender from Avatar.
You see it, and people think, oh, that's pretty boring or whatever. Yeah, I guess it is if you're looking for something a bit more fast-paced.
Kung Fu.
You know, Kung Fu. And they did some Kung Fu there, too, but it was more Tai Chi. And I went there. I contacted some schools in the area when I got to the town, and the next day, a trainer came to my hostel door. No one... most big places you go, you're going to have other foreigners traveling around with you. But in this city, there were none. I was the only white guy
that you knew.
I wasn't the only white guy I would see my whole time there, but it was only one other dude in another school that I got to meet with later on. Like I was the only one at my school too. And this trainer picked me up, and he was wearing you see me on the cover wearing the white.
The Giza?
Like, he was wearing, I don't even know the name of it.
I think that's something that it might be called.
He was in black, and he picks me up. He takes me to the place to get that. I didn't know I was even supposed to, so I buy an outfit, and then we head up the mountain. And a lot of Chinese tourists go up there because there's like old temples and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's these schools, and I would live at this school for 9 days. It was only going to be a weekend at first, but then I decided to stay an extra week, and they work out a deal with me where I can teach English to the other students, the Chinese national, they're Chinese, and I can teach them English, and some are young, like 5th grade, and some are high school age, and then I get a reduced rate on staying there an extra week. So I was there a total of 9 days, and it was just the whole, like, long story short, it was the whole clash or compliment, is probably a better way to put it, or depending on the experience or the day, clash or compliment of West and East. And it was just so typical how I was always trying to like get through something fast or like cut corners with my practice, you know, and they would have to constantly remind me to do it right, to practice, you know, and it was repetitive, and that kind of drove me crazy.
Yeah.
Because it's slow, monotonous movements over and over, repetitive. Yep.
Yeah, I did a pretty good job in the book of articulating it and putting it into words. Of the first day I was there, my trainer says, okay, he points, he shows me to my room. I put my stuff down on the bed. Okay, let's go start. And I remember my initial thought was, whoa, can't we, like, I don't know, wait till after lunch or something? You know, let's kick it. Let's just, you know, I'm on vacation, you know. And there's like, no, let's go. So we go out to the cement slab, the concrete slab where a lot of the practice took place. And he starts showing me this choreography. And I'm trying it, and it involves a step, okay. And of course, it's like walking through water. It's so slow. And if you're not conscious of it regularly, you're going to do it wrong. Because you're going to be leaning on the wrong leg, or you're not going to have the right angle, or you're not going to keep your toes in the air when you step, your heel toe, you know, you're going to just do it sloppy. And that's exactly how I wanted to do it. I just wanted to. And we finally got done with that. We have lunch, and it's not like a very satisfying, rich, tasty lunch. It's like plain, like some meat and some veggies and okay, let's go back out. And I'm like, I gotta get out of here.
This sounded fun to start, but
man.
now I'm not liking this.
Like,
yeah.
That's exactly right. Like, we all have these romantic ideas. Like, you imagine like some flute player, like
snakes in a basket doing something.
What's the name of that show? Kung Fu: The Legend Continues. David, the actor.
I would say
I was defaulting to Kung Fu Panda.
Oh boy, yeah. No, there's a much richer comparison.
Okay,
a much more
sorry.
colorful one, because the guy who played Kung Fu: The Legend Continues is the same guy who played Bill in Kill Bill.
Oh, okay.
And he died in a notable way.
Okay.
Do you know this?
No, Ty, if you're
do you know this? How he? Okay, I'll let
our listeners, they're searching it right
well,
now.
I'll let if he
does that.
Does he do that? Yeah. So his name is like David. I think it's David S. I can't remember, but just Bill from Kill Bill, how he died, and then yeah. So that's, I don't know how Kung Fu Panda died, but
Still not dead.
I promise you it wasn't this way.
Kung Fu Panda's coming out in a couple years.
Although I haven't discounted how Jack Black might go. Maybe he'll do the same things. I don't know.
As this story?
Yeah,
okay.
We'll see.
But you were romanticizing this experience, and it wasn't that. It was getting bland, as you were saying. Yeah.
It wasn't bland, no. But I thought it was, because I want whatever I want to eat when I want it. I want to switch to the channels when I want it. I want to watch, go on my social media and check my feed when I want it. I want. We're just so used to satisfying and constant stimulation. And that was the opposite. It was a practice in presence.
Yep. And they're
practicing.
and they're making it super difficult for you to practice the presence.
No, I just sucked at it. I was just so bad at being present. Like, they didn't give me okay, and have this rock balanced on your head. I mean, they weren't giving me a hard time. I was just bad at it. I just wasn't very good at it. Right? I just wasn't very used to being in that mode of operating. Like, the very first experience. Okay, after doing that one initial choreography, we look over the edge of the cement slab, which turned out to be the roof of this compound where the other students were sleeping. And I look down, and they're doing some shoveling. And I don't think they even needed to move the dirt. I just think they were doing it as a practice. And I go down there, and this one student/trainer, he was like a trainer in making, he handed me the shovel. I think he was, at this point, at the beginning, okay, let's see what you got, American. And I grabbed the shovel, and I'm like, okay, whatever, I'm shoveling. And he stops me right away, and he takes the shovel back from me, and he's like, mm-mm. And he shows me the proper way to, have both your knees bent, have the shovel ready. And he literally made those whoo, whoo sounds that you would pretend to use as a kid. And he made them, it's like he vocalized the movement.
Yeah.
And then out came the dirt. And I knew right there, I was like, okay, this is the fundamental difference between me and these people, and this is what I'm going to have to learn to do. And that is that it isn't about getting it done quicker, but because I was thinking, why are we using shovels? Don't we have a wheelbarrow? Don't we have something here that can, I'm thinking of quicker
ways to move the dirt faster.
Let's get this thing done. Yeah. And they're like, well, how about just doing it better? All right, and that, of course, wasn't even a thought. I did think, okay, so this Tai Chi stuff, we'll keep doing it in the afternoon, and then it'll be dinner time. That's good. Oh, but then we go back out for an evening one and sunset. Oh, but then I got to go to sleep. Okay, that's a nice break. And then I got to get up at 5 a.m. to jog. Oh, so when do I get to end this? And I'm like, well, the end of the weekend. And I was like, dude, hold on. You're basically planning your departure, and you just got here. This is why you need to be here. And that helped kind of snap me back.
Wow.
And it was I bought a Malcolm Gladwell book off the street of Beijing. It was a pirated one. They just sell books for cheap in Asian countries. At least they used to. Vietnam, and you'll find a Lonely Planet with typos in it. And I found some Malcolm Gladwell book, and I remember reading through it so fast. All right, because they didn't have the distractions. I remember I would nap, and I would read voraciously, And I remember like, this is awesome. Like, I'm present. I can like digest this new information so much quicker because I'm not distracted with all this other stuff. So the lessons of that practice were immediate. It was just the initial hump to get over was also extraordinary. But thankfully I was able to do it and then stay and then maintain a practice there for 9 days, which I know doesn't sound a lot of time, but one day felt like a long time.
Right.
And then a whole weekend, then I'm going to stay another week. So the nice bow ribbon on this story is that at the end they were down the valley, because this is so by the way, this is on a mountainside, so you've got like these valley distant green blue views of fog over the hill. I mean, it is romantic. But they were down the valley collecting twigs and other wood for the wood stove, and they were having a heck of a time doing it. One of the female students was like trying to take a bundle of pine needles, and she was like, it hurt her hands. So I saw a couple of like rake like tools.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, oh, hold on, and I took those 2 rake like tools and I like scrunched the pine needles together
like you're picking up salad.
Yeah, and that's actually what I wrote in the book. I said, hey, I just eat differently, that's all. I don't use I did when I was there, use chopsticks, but I was able to consider, like, just take these 2 rakes and squish them together and you can get a lot more pine needles in one at once. And I remember her saying, oh, so clever, Feng Xiang, which was my Chinese name. And then later these guys had this bundle of sticks tied up and to take up this narrow path up the hill. And there was this, like, they had to break off the twigs sticking out or they'd hit and get caught on trees along the side of the path. So there was this one stubborn, thick, short branch that they were trying to kick. And they knew how to kick, these guys, these students and trainers. But they weren't getting it to break. Do you understand what I'm getting at? What I'm saying here? This
It's a long twig. They're trying to break it.
Yeah, they're trying to break the side. Yeah. So I see a stone nearby, about the size of a skull maybe, and I take it and I just jam it underneath that stick. And then that allows me just to kind of go up and with my sloppy kick, I'm just still able to break it. And they're like,
leverage.
hey, high five, hey. And I was just so happy to contribute something for once at that place, because I was just like kind of all thumbs.
So you were wise at that point.
Well, I was, but that's the way I think. I remember that was like the lesson from my time there. Like, I don't know if people will think this is controversial to stereotype like this, but they perfected the punch. They would punch, it's that same kind of practice where you just do it over and over and over and over again until you know how to do it just right. And it just seemed to me that like my ancestors would have been like, let's just make an easier way to hurt somebody. Like, let's invent something. Let's not worry about punching perfectly. Let's just like make a gun, or let's make a better firearm or something,
Yeah. But to your point, I don't know if it's necessarily controversial. I just think it's 2 different ways of looking at a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And both those perspectives work. Just like you practicing presence and how much that enabled you to dive into a Malcolm Gladwell book and be present in your crazy world, they could absolutely use a little bit of your inventor, creative side of their brain to get tasks done. So bravo, brother.
That was the lesson evident from there, and it just reinforced the idea that that the different cultures can, it's not about which culture is better, it's about the fact that they both excel at different things. Each culture excels at different things, and then that we can come together for a bigger whole, and we all can benefit, right?
Yes.
I mean, it was like after school special lesson there. But it was just it just hit me right over the head. It was so obvious, and during my 9 days there, and it was the way the book ends up too. So it's
sweet,
it's
man.
a nice way to finish.
That's
my time
awesome.
There.
How did Bill die? Sorry. We'll
So
circle back.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about changing pace here. So his name is Dave Carradine, I think. Carradine?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so I'm just going to read the Wikipedia, so this is not from me. He was in Bangkok to shoot his latest film, titled Stretch. A police official said that Carradine was found naked, hanging by a rope in the room's closet, causing immediate speculation that his death was suicide. However, reported evidence suggested that his death was accidental, the result of autoerotic asphyxiation.
Whoa. So he's choking himself for
To get off.
pleasure?
Yeah, you know.
Whoa. That's wild.
Wow.
That's why I said Kung Fu Panda.
And
Just
that's
like
why
that.
you didn't want to say it. You wanted the Wikipedia. Did
Well,
you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I don't want to talk about that nonsense.
Yeah,
And
no,
it's-
that's fair.
Yeah, no.
Let's have Wikipedia do the dirty work.
You're right.
Exactly. But what Wikipedia is not going to do the dirty work on is your newest documentary, The Wall. And Andrew and I, you know, as we've been saying this for a long time in our BackPocket short history, but we do our research and we pride ourselves on that. And we watched The Wall documentary today. To be honest, I'm currently 30 minutes in. I'll finish the thing, but Andrew, you confirmed you finished it?
I finished it, yes.
Awesome. And Ty got it sent to him. I don't know if did you tune in at all?
Dex sent it to me like 30 minutes before I was supposed to come over here, and it's an hour and 15 minutes long, and
That's so like you,
I
dude.
didn't get a chance.
It's so
It is
like-
very much. He
good
knows
chance.
me.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, let's freaking dive into that just and give a little bit of context, understand, you know, what The Wall is, the history behind it. I'd love to just dive right in, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would like to start with, you open up the documentary talking about how you went to the Pacific Northwest
Yeah.
and you wanted to film this documentary on people and get to kind of like just hear their stories. And it ended up being a lot of interviewing homeless people. So then you came back to the Twin Cities and The Wall was just starting and you seized an opportunity. So that gives you a little context of why Brandon chose to do a documentary on The Wall.
Yeah, it didn't come out of nowhere. Well, first, I'm from northern Minnesota, so the only other ethnicity up there are Native Americans, for the most part. That's changing now, but, you know, I'm 38, so when I was 8 years old, it was white people and the Native Americans. And so I've always had this interest, and my dad used to do a lot of work with them as an auto mechanic, and the interactivity between the white and Native cultures was pretty strong and pretty good up there for my childhood. But then I would, then in my adult years, when I had this YouTube channel rocking, I started driving around the U.S. And I traveled the U.S. South the summer of 2016, and then the summer of 2017, I traveled the Pacific Northwest. And in both times, I made just an enormous loop around the country, back down to the South and back, over to the Pacific Northwest and back to Minnesota. And I just interviewed people along the way. Some were set up beforehand, and some were completely spontaneous. I just wanted to get an idea of what life was like where they lived, how they saw the world. Like, do you think the world's getting better? Do you think it's going to hell? Do you think you're leaving it a better place for your kids? And I did that in the South, and I got a lot of good responses on YouTube. Those are my first real successful videos on YouTube. Were a couple of interviews with Southerners. And then I replicated that in the Pacific Northwest. And that's where I encountered a bunch of the homeless people. And I thought, oh, and so, you know, this gets back to what I initially said about looking at a social issue and trying to have a
Dual perspective.
a dual perspective, exactly. Because when you read about homelessness and the problems with it, and if you just talk to people out on the street, you're going to get one of two responses. And that's reasonable because people only have a few seconds to give you a response. So it's going to be kind of a knee-jerk response. And it's probably either going to be either one of pity or judgment or cynicism. Like, it's either going to be, yeah, they're victims or they're lazy. All right? There's not a lot of, like, well, maybe they did choose to get addicted, but they were victims of something younger when they were younger, so it led them to addiction. So, you know, like, this kind of a blend here. But that kind of nuance, you know, when you're doing snap judgments and you want to get clicks and all that, that's just not amenable to how news and media is done today. And all the coverage I read about it in like the Seattle Times and so forth would always be about lack of housing and this and that. But then I talked to a lot of people that they were not interested in even getting housing. And so I thought there's something here that's not adding up. Like there are, and if it's weather, which is what people always say about the reason why there's so many homeless people out there, why are there not nearly as many homeless people in southern cities as there are in Pacific Northwest? Like, it doesn't snow in like Little Rock, it doesn't snow in Houston, but it sure as heck snows in Seattle, or at least it gets cold and wet and miserable. So why would you stay there in the winter? Well, and Seattle has way more homeless people, and it's quite a bit smaller than Houston, and Houston has a lot fewer homeless people than Seattle. So it's like something here just isn't really adding up. So I wanted to take a deeper dive, as you say. Then I came back here, and I had that idea in the back of my head, and time flies, and a year goes by, and then suddenly I read in the Star Tribune about the tent city here in Minneapolis, and I just knew. I just like, that's it. So the next day, I called up a buddy, probably the day before, and I said, hey, Nathan, can you come with? I want to go down to that tent city and interview some people. And I didn't know if it was going to be dangerous or anything. I had no idea. So I show up, and it's anything but dangerous. It's totally cool. Like it looked like a campsite at first, because there was about 15 tents when I got there, and they were out there cooking on a grill, and it was very casual. It seemed quite relaxing, actually. Of course, that was just me showing up in the middle of the day. I wasn't having to deal with living in a tent at night and da-da-da. But I interviewed a guy there who was Earl. Earl's the first and the last guy I interviewed in the movie, the main person in the film. I'm always unsure what to call him. Character. I certainly can't call him star. That seems wrong.
Standoffish. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but he's the person featured most in the film. I go back to him repeatedly throughout the fall. I was fortunate to meet him right away. He was willing to talk. I would make an interview with him on YouTube and just have a video just of him. And then I would, like I say, go back to him and his wife, Kat, throughout the fall. And I must have interviewed them either together or separate 10, 12 times. And throughout the film is their progress, their or lack thereof. There's a lot of spinning wheels, are going to get around, because they struggle with their addiction. And they have children that they're not able to care for. So there's that factor. And meanwhile, the tent city is continuing to grow and grow and grow. So I described it as I did when I first arrived, and it was sunny, and they were grilling, and it was quite casual and even comfortable for as far as a campsite can be comfortable. But then November, it snows, and it's packed, and it's the mood is depressing. They had a remarkable spirit there, though. I mean, they were. I almost wondered if they didn't embrace the challenge of the elements. It felt like they almost did. They would sit around a fire, and they would talk, and they would just keep each other company throughout the day. And the way they saw it, they're kind of waiting it out. They're kind of maybe taking a stand, at least showing the volume of people that are in need of help. And that's also what they saw their presence as.
And then right in the fall, so in August,
Mm-hmm.
there wasn't a lot of people there.
Mm-hmm.
Can you fill our listeners in on like why they picked this spot on Hiawatha with the wall, and how it became so popular and why it became overpopulated?
Yeah, I think, to the best of my knowledge, there are, and have been for years, if not decades, little spots around the Twin Cities around Minneapolis, St. Paul. I mean, this isn't a huge problem in Bloomington, in the suburbs. It's the two cities. There'll be a little park space here, a little boulevard there, a little lawn here or there. They'll just find, wherever they can stay out of trouble, keep their stuff safe, and commune without making too big of a scene. And it's a game of whack-a-mole. The analogy of whack-a-mole, where you hit the problem here, but then it pops up over here. So like the city has been doing that with homelessness for years, if not decades. So the city will clear out a tent camp, and then they'll migrate somewhere else. And you can't do that, because it's technically it's illegal. You can't just camp on city land like that. You can camp in a park if you pay, but you can't just camp. You couldn't just camp around Lake of the Isles if you wanted. That's not legal. So the city would come in and clear it out. But for some reason, and I suppose it was just an inevitable thing, because it had been long past the time they'd done it out west in the western cities, Portland, Seattle, Vancouver, LA, San Francisco. The city said, okay, go ahead. When they camped along this sound barrier wall along Hiawatha, Highway 55, just leaving southeast from downtown. You can see the new Viking Stadium, and it goes down to the airport, down to Mall of America. It's that stretch of freeway. They were on the west side of that, just south of downtown.
About 100 yards away from a park.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right next to a park. I think there's a community center nearby. There was housing projects nearby, and then some businesses along Franklin there. And I don't know what came first, chicken or egg. If it was the media attention and then the city felt compelled to not go hard on it, because then that would have really gotten on the front page. The last thing the city wanted, I'm sure at the time, was attention toward their policing at a time where, even today, police are on, the last thing you want to be is on the news for doing something wrong as a police officer. Mm-hmm. So they did not, I assume from a PR perspective and from their ideological perspective, they want to be caring, a caring city. They don't want to be seen as a hard city. So when you had these tents come up, and when the media went out there, the city, right around that same time, again, I don't know if it was chicken or egg, but the city gave it its blessing to stay. And then ultimately the state, because it was state land. It was not DMV, MnDOT. It was MnDOT property technically. They own that stretch along that freeway. And then MnDOT said, fine, we won't do anything either. And then the mayor gave an impassioned talk about how this was their land. He gave that kind of tone, and how we're going to get everyone here housing. And that's what did it. Then it went from dozens of tents to what would become hundreds.
Yep, and this was in August, and they announced that they were going to get housing in September. And as the documentary progresses, that housing gets pushed back all the way to December. So they experienced the warmth of the summer days when there was not a lot of people, to more and more people coming, and the weather getting worse and worse, and degree temperature getting colder. So now you have an overpopulated area that they shouldn't be there, but it's just being allowed, and with the hope of them having housing. And it was... And I let into this when you walked in the room. I was like, the documentary I watched was exhausting, in the sense of these people that came had high spirits. They were ready to change their lives. They had addiction issues of meth, and they had some shitty situations with the previous maybe parents or living situation. And there was hope. There was a lot of chance for change. And you kept on interviewing Earl and Kat, and I was watching it, and I'm just like almost in tears, just like, these people are, one, damaging themselves without taking action. They were saying these things, they're going to take some action, and they wouldn't follow through. And also you're watching just kind of like the community trying to support them, trying to give everything they could, and just like self-inflicting wounds, but also cultural wounds and all these different variations in between. And I'm just like, oh my God, I am exhausted from
the situation
of having the hope for them, and then just being it kind of ripped away.
Yeah, just watching it is exhausting, and it's exhausting considering you almost get paralyzed when considering, what can I do? That's the first thing people ask, right? What can I do? Or at least the first question a lot of people ask, and it's a frustrating question to try to answer, because everything's been. Not everything. A lot of things have been done, and done repeatedly. You can give another $5. You can give another tent. But these are deep-seated, multimodal, many causes to these situations. All right. So there is a lot they can point to how they were victimized, and there's a lot you can point to how they keep making the same bad decisions. And when you have that combination, so if nothing else, the film reveals the situation as is.
Yeah. You do a great job of that.
I wanted to remove myself from this film. Like if I do a documentary on the homeless crisis, which I'm actually going to do next, because
like
I started doing it, and then this tent city was going to be just a part of that, and then I realized, no, this is its own movie. And it's just practically speaking, it's a lot more manageable to do a film on this specific story and the people there than trying to do something about homelessness in America, which is a Ken Burns documentary. I mean, it's huge. You could have that be as big as you wanted. So I bit off more than I could chew, but I did go down to Houston and Dallas. I did go out to the Pacific Northwest. I did research the causes of homelessness, at least homelessness that we know today, because we kind of know, like, this didn't always exist. Like, didn't homelessness used to be hobos at railroad tracks? Like, what happened? So then something did happen, and it's fascinating. But it's a more of an educational, analytical, and it'll put my own spin on it just a little bit because I have to interpret the history and present it. But this movie, The Wall, I just let them talk, right? And so people were actually mad at me in the premiere because why don't you talk more about this or that? And it's like, they didn't. I just interviewed the residents there, and they talked about their lives, their frustrations, and then I shared the story from the news clips, right? I'll let that do the talking of the
narrative,
of the actual tent city, but the lives within were what I most wanted to share. I told them I want to share their voice. They had a subtitle for or a longer title for their community. It was called The Wall of Forgotten Natives. And so to help them know where I was coming from, because I'm just an outsider, a white guy, to help them, I think, feel a little more comfortable with what I was doing, I said, you call your community The Wall of Forgotten Natives. I just want to do what I can to help your voice be heard, help your story be heard, so you're no longer forgotten. And that's ultimately, I think, what the movie does, in addition to presenting the issue of homelessness and this particular camp, which is sort of a microcosm for camps in other cities.
It's very raw too, man. Like one part that just freaking stuck with me already was the younger kid. I think his name's Jake. Towards the beginning of the movie, he's got like the longer hair. He kind of tells a story about leaving home and everything like that, and he was actually complimenting the tent space, saying how great it was to, like, how the people around him actually kind of feel community. Like when you go through some of these living homes, you're kind of just thrown to the side, and it's you smell each other's farts, you do this, you do that. It just kind of sucks. But here it felt different. It was more personalized, and everybody actually kind of got along for the most part at that time. And one of the guys interjects is like, yeah, we do drugs together. And you're like, you guys do drugs together? Like, what kind of drugs? And you're like, they're like, oh yeah, we shoot up meth together and like this stuff. And I was just like, dude, like that is just
I mean, if
crazy.
It
was just raw. It was capturing those moments that nobody else sees.
Yeah, if you're not familiar with, other than from TV and dramatizations on Law and Order or some, I don't know, maybe I'm dating myself. Is Law and Order even on anymore?
Oh, it is. I think. SVU.
Yeah, some alphabet Law and Order out there, or some CSI thing. Yeah. I don't know. But you get these stereotyped depictions of inner city, and like there's movies that show, like Wind River was a movie about the
Jeremy Renner,
the Wind River reservation in Wyoming. You see these depictions, but to see them in reality is it can be shocking. And yeah, I was surprised how it was actually. I know who you're talking about.
Sorry, it may have been a she.
It was she. Sorry. She had a shorter haircut. Yeah, she just was freely admitted that. I was like, did you shoot up today? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, you don't act like it, because she said she shot up meth, and so I'd expect her to be fidgety or wired in some way, but she's like, well, yeah, I'm coming down now. I'm like, oh, does that feel lousy? Nah, I smoked some weed, just, yeah, that's, and she got there because she had a bad domestic situation with her mother, and her mother had to call the cops. I think that's the line from their movie verbatim. Yeah. A restraining order on her own daughter. What you really see are how decimated some of these communities are. I've covered the inner city too with articles, one for the Star Tribune and one for my own blog, featuring every homicide death in Minneapolis in 2016. And I interviewed, or I didn't interview every family, but I researched every death, and all but like there was around 36, and all but like 4 were inner city black homicide. And then I would interview a few of those families, and I would go to some of the vigils, and you realize how common it is in these families to have a shot relative. Like they all have, oh yeah, my cousin got shot here, my uncle got shot in Chicago. You know, it's not rare. And that, you know, to people who live in safer neighborhoods, if you have one family member that gets shot, it's like the one secret in the family that no one talks about or something, right? It's a huge deal, but they have it multiple times. And it's the same way with the Native American community, but probably with either not having their kids able to be living with them or people in their lives that they know that have overdosed. It's just, it's part of life. It's regular. There were 4 deaths in the camp while I filmed. Actually, you don't know this yet, but one of the people that you've seen is going to die by the end of the movie. Three of the people I interviewed they died at the end of the movie. So they're in the film, and then you learn at the end that they're dead.
Yeah, the one that really stuck with me was the guy that had the hopes and dreams to start a boxing clinic and passed away due to the city creating these homes for them to live after the weather came in, and they cleared out the wall. They created these little homes, or not homes. It was just basically a giant tent where they could have a bed. And the whole documentary depicts how that's the last place that those people wanted to go to, was an abandoned warehouse type living situation where they're all crowded into one, because that just turns into fighting and stealing, versus having their own tent they loved far more in the frigid cold because it was their space. They had enclosed quarters versus having a shower, food, and warmth in a shelter. That was, they did not want to go there, and that was shocking me. And this guy goes there and eventually ODs because the community just got overridden with drugs. And I mean, the solutions weren't there, and people just kept on finding themselves in the same rabbit holes. And again, that's why
it's the way the movie ends. It's bleak. It is bleak. I also had people mad at me for the film too, because I think they thought it depicted the help as not being all that helpful. So I was shocked when I went to the the shelters that they built for these residents of the tent city. They built 3, as you described. They're kind of like army barracks. They're quite cozy inside. I mean, I think I don't know if it was carpeted, but it was they were partitioned, and inside was it wasn't like a cold army barrack. It was more like an off, I don't know how to describe it. It was quite cozy. I mean, just put it that way. Anyway, I would talk to Earl and Kat while they were in there, and everyone did drugs openly. And Mayor said that there would be no drug use on site. That's in the film. And then it turned out they let them use drugs openly. And me sharing that fact, I think, made people mad. But I was blown away when I visited the shelters, because outside the shelters, people were openly using and dealing drugs. Like, I saw people with meth and crack, like, handing it off to each other, and people shooting up, and it was all right there out in the open. Like, it was the exact opposite of the kind of situation the people at the tent city needed. It was the opposite. Like, you couldn't have put them in a more dangerous, lethal. Okay, you probably could if you got inventive, but let's be real. Like, that was an awful situation. And I don't want to criticize the people who reached out to help, who helped raise money for that. Red Lake donated the land and the money, and that's all wonderful. What it speaks to, I don't mean to criticize, and I don't want to come across as critical of the efforts. But we do need other kinds of solutions, right? We do need other kinds of solutions. And their repeated enabling is killing people, right? So it's harder to see that because you think you're being good and you think you're doing the right thing by providing and relenting to the desires, to the even I guess just the desires of an addict.
Yeah.
But you're not. You're letting them kill themselves, and that's what happened. And then the police apparently didn't do much because there was, like I said, open drug use. It was basically a little drug market right out in front of this shelter. So they'd come and go, and then the worst was watching. I interviewed the 17-year-old who I didn't put in the movie because he was only 17, and he seemed real clear-headed, pretty fresh-faced. He was 17. And it was fall, so I'm like, how come you're not in school? He's like, well, I'm going to get back to high school here. I don't live with my parents anymore, blah, blah, blah. I was in foster care. Okay. So I interview him just the one time, and I wish him well, and I see him later at the shelter in the wintertime. And he's at the shelter, and he's completely out of his mind. I mean, he's gone. He's all drugged up. And, I mean, who knows when he started using drugs. It could have been months before that at the tent city. But Good luck getting sober in that place, in that shelter where everyone around you is using, and even if you're not, yeah, good luck resisting when everyone you know is. So it became a very toxic place. I mean, that's just an objective truth. Whether you did I'm not saying you didn't do the best you could. I'm not saying you didn't try to help. I'm not saying your heart wasn't in the right place, but the results were bad. They were very, very bad, and so. There's a place for policing. There's a place for law enforcement that I think the city now knows, it seems, because this year they're not allowing another tent city. They've cracked down to the anger of a lot of people, by the way. So I kind of give the mayor credit because you can't let an area like that grow when it's going to become dangerous.
Yeah. And
it's going to become a place where people deal drugs and deal people, right? There was prostitution going on at this place, right? And there were kids living there. I mean, it was unacceptable.
Damn.
And they're just there's a point where you have to step in, and so the city isn't going to let another. It didn't let one happen this summer. We'll see what happens down the road. The problem hasn't gone away though, and that's the bottom line. There's a bunch of people out there that are having trouble getting on their feet, getting clean, feeling like they're worth a damn, feeling like they can contribute to the world, and that's ultimately the biggest. That's the root of this problem. People who have very little self-worth.
Sure.
Agreed.
And so there's no quick answer to that. There's no quick answer to that.
And I think that goes back to your point of saying how the city gave them shelter and food and warmth, the basic hierarchy of needs. You think if that's given to these homeless people, these Native Americans, that everything will be solved and the drug problem will go away. They'll want to get sober, but really they have no self. They don't believe in themselves for the most part. And I mean, I've watched one documentary. I don't want to be like coming out here with these general terms, but from my perspective of watching it, it was saddening to the point where they don't believe in themselves, that they can go get a job and maintain a steady life while they're like making payments because they're afraid that since they've been crime ridden, that no one's going to accept them. And if they're inside a community, everyone's going to look at them sideways and be like, why are you here? They already have those preconceived notions across the board. And they're like, I rather be hidden from that and continue to punish myself.
That's why I think homelessness is growing across the country, regardless of what community you're from. You go out to the West Coast, you see plenty of white homeless people, black homeless people, Latinos, whatever. There's a growing number of people in the country who are they're just checking out. And by that, I mean, like, we're checking out of our hotel room. They're checking out of society. They're just like, peace, I'm checking out. And I'm just going to go hang out in this park all day. All right, peace. And a growing number of people are doing that. And this is systemic. And by that, I mean that two ways. One, it's happening on a system level, like just across the America society. And two, it's systemic in that it is a systemic problem. Like, it's a problem with the American economy and the more people being left behind. And this is where I really side with people who, I guess you would say, lean left, more liberal. Like, it is harder for people, especially if you imagine being, you think of the practicality of being homeless and then having to try to get a job and put together a first and last month's rent and a deposit or whatever the requirements are, and then doing all that while living on the street. I mean, it's almost preposterous to think that someone could go from the streets to an apartment when the rents are just rising up faster and faster and faster and all that. So I'm in the middle. No surprise there when it comes to the ideological. If you look at it as a continuum from very conservative to very liberal, I'm kind of in the middle. I've seen solutions in other cities work where they're provided housing free, and that can go bad. Like in Minneapolis, I know of one building where they're provided free housing, and all it is a place where everyone drinks and does drugs, and no one does anything, and it's actually quite terrible. And someone I know lives there. I've interviewed people that live there, and it's not a good situation. On the other hand, if you pair that with services that encourage them to
flourish,
build their lives back up,
Yeah.
build their esteem back up, then providing just the basics is a great foundation, right? Then providing a place to sleep, the foundation of, I got a place I can put my stuff. I don't have to worry about it getting taken.
security.
I'm going to be warm or cool depending on the climate. I'm going to get fed. I'm going to be able to take care of this. I don't have to worry about these immediate things right now. And I can go to counseling. Now I can go to, but if they don't jump off and try to improve themselves from that foundation, then they're just going to sit there and wallow in addiction in a county-funded housing project.
Yeah. I had a question about that. So you mentioned earlier how the police and kind of the people watching over the tent city or the warehouse were kind of drawing a blind eye maybe to the drug use and everything. Did you ever interview any of the policemen or the people that were around the area?
I tried. There's a couple of occasions where the police are on the video. The police were in a tough spot. I have my stances on things and my beliefs about what would be the best way to proceed, like anyone else does.
Yeah.
But I never try to come down and come down on people. Like I appreciate the circumstance all the people who were involved were in. We are too quick in this country to point the finger and blame. We'd rather blame someone for something than try to actually fix a situation ourselves. And that's backwards. All right, that's childish. So if I think that they should have done more policing around the homeless shelter that they built for the residents of the homeless camp, okay, I do believe that, yeah. But they were in a really tough spot. It's like you're either going to crack down on the homeless problem, or are you going to protect? Or are you going to serve? Like it's like protect and serve. So are they going to protect society from a growing homeless camp and the violence and maybe the flourishing drug market there? Or are you going to be more along the lines of serving and helping and being seen as a friend? Well, they really wanted to try that latter approach. So the police would actually go out there, and they have a hired liaison that works with the homeless community. And I got to know him. I saw him out there repeatedly. He's actually the very beginning of my movie. He's the guy that gives Earl the blueberries because he kept just he would go out there with donations, and he tried to make friends with them, and that's great. Later though, there was a bad relationship between the police and the people at the tent city, and they would fight and argue. And then the police wouldn't really go there much at all. So the police took a very hands-off approach, and that got the people at the tent city they made a lot of them upset because they wanted the police there to help keep the place safe, and they thought the police weren't there enough. So it's hard. It's hard to find that line. It's not what I'm paid to do. It's what they're paid to do. But I can just imagine that would be a very, very tough thing to do.
I'll tell you what though, man, like just listening to this whole thing with your story and everything that you've put together, and like you said at the very beginning, like the last thing you wanted to do was for it to be about you. And I think what we should highlight is you. Like you've already talked about all the different travels that you've had, all the different perspectives, the things that you've been willing to do to unpack or uncover rather a different perspective for guys like Andrew and I who live 5 minutes down the road having absolutely no idea what's going on. So I just think it's very impressive and honestly amazing the work that you've done, regardless of what people think about it, right? The fact that they have thoughts is actually what is actually beneficial about the whole thing. The fact that we can at least look into this lens.
That's true.
And see what this was,
and
then evaluate it was something that we never had before. And I just want to say thank you, man. That's super, super cool.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Getting-
But I would say, sorry.
Getting criticism actually is better than nothing.
Nothing.
You're right. You're
Exactly.
absolutely right. It got people thinking, got people reacting. The premieres got a good amount of attention. It was just the right time. The story was still fresh. They hadn't left the shelter yet that they had built for them. It was still in the spring, and a couple of news pieces picked it up, and so it was going to be under scrutiny.
Yeah.
And so you can expect some pushback too.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
And to continue on the train of you and focusing on your story,
Mm-hmm.
we love to ask some back pocket core questions. And our first one's an average quality question.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something you do well at times and other times not so well. At the end of the day, it's your average quality. So, Brandon, what is your average quality?
Yeah, I thought about this a while, and I kept thinking of like, well, I do that really bad, and I do that good.
We hope you think that way.
So like to think in the middle, like an average thing. I'm gonna say time management, even though to be honest, I'm probably mediocre at best at that. But
Yeah, sometimes you nail it. Like you were on time today, and we weren't on time. We ran over with our previous guest.
all right,
So
I'll go with that.
competitively, we were average.
But when it comes to like pacing myself or something, I really have a tough time with that. To sit back, engage. Okay, I want this to be ready. Like I made the premiere date May 19th, and I set that up in like March, and I just am like, well, I better have the movie done by May 19th, and so ready or not, here it comes, and it forced me to get it done. I mean, it wasn't the most responsible because it wasn't honestly it wasn't the best product. I would end up doing some revision work with audio and a couple of scene just little tweaks here and there for later screenings, and that's fine. I mean, the movie was pretty much done and people got the idea of the story and everything, so it was still a good product. But putting that date out there like that, and most filmmakers would have, this is my first film, so I don't know what I was doing, but I've learned now that most filmmakers would have like set a year out or something like that. So you're talking like spring 2020. It's like, no, spring 2019. It is spring 2019. Yeah, but later in the spring 2019, I'll have it done. And, I was thinking more of a YouTuber, like, oh, it's just a long YouTube video. No, it's a movie, dude. I mean, like, I didn't appreciate all the work that went into it. And so, it was a lot of late nights and just a lot of weekends and all that stuff, yeah.
Well, that's pretty amazing, man. And I assume you're going to be creating more movies now.
Well, I'm actually still tweaking this one because subtitles are a son of a bitch, as I've learned. All that typing and the formatting to be just so. I didn't know all the unwritten or maybe even written rules when it comes to subtitles, and I'm still learning them. So I have to finish that. I got a screening on the 24th next Tuesday in La Crosse at Viterbo University. Shout out if anyone is in that area. And it's a free screening of the film at their Fine Arts Theater. Yeah,
cool.
Right in La Crosse, Wisconsin.
Are you going to be putting it on YouTube at any point, you think?
I will.
Okay.
But first I'm going, because if you put it out there on YouTube, it renders your movie ineligible for film fests.
Oh.
From what I understand. I'm still learning this too. But
Okay.
I'm 99% sure that if you put it on YouTube, you're not going to be able to be in some of the film fests. And I'm still brand new to this process, so I'm playing it safe, and I'm not putting it out on YouTube yet. And plus, I still love the screening format. I had one like 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago in Edina at this performance art studio, I like to call it, called Here and There Live. You guys actually should check it out. It's a really cool space to record audio. There's like live performances there, and it's in the Southdale Mall.
Okay.
So it's an interesting location, and they have a really affordable membership rates for artists of all kinds to join. And so I've done some voiceover recording there. I just go there and work sometimes. And anyway, I had a screening there, and we held 100 comfortably, and we got it about 70 people to show it.
Nice.
I love the screening format. If I put it on YouTube, it's just out there, and there's no like ceremony, there's no event, and I like to have the events. Plus, the movie's not 100% done, so but
you
it
need to
will
watch
be
the
very
audience
soon.
a little bit, see their reactions.
They get to ask questions, and in fact, at this last one, I had James Cross come with me, and he was the guy in the film who was shown a couple of times, interviewed, who was volunteering at the camp daily.
Slick back hair, the long hair.
Yep,
Yeah.
helping to work with. He's the founder and leader of Natives Against Heroin, who, as an insider, as a Native American himself, goes in there and tries to, not just keep the peace and help administer first aid when someone overdoses or someone gets injured. Distributes all the donations that were coming in. They did all that there. But then they're there to say, hey, you can put down that needle. You can do better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? And only someone in that community can say it like that.
Right.
You know, and that's power. And so I really like the work that he and his group are doing. And so when it comes to solutions to the problem specific to the movie, I think it's actually groups like that.
I think you're onto something.
Yeah,
especially inside the community.
It's a slow burn. It's a long, slow, I think, solution. But I don't think there's any quick one.
Mm-hmm.
And empowerment, I think, is the key word.
Mm.
And I think groups like that can help their community pick themselves up and feel a little bit better about themselves, and practice their culture and be proud of who they are. Right,
Yeah.
Those guys' voice and women, those leaders' voices, I think, are crucial. I think they're the most important work being done.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly,
So your average quality was time management.
time management, yeah.
Yep. And then our next question is, what's in your back pocket? So when pressure's becoming stress and anxiety's rising, what do you have in your back pocket to overcome these situations?
I had a couple of high stress situations at the camp, and where people threatened me, and I just I tend to go into I think this could be good or bad, but it's been good. I kind of go into this mode. I assume this
Persona.
kind of stiff defensive mode where I stay resilient. And maybe it would be deemed foolish if ever the results were negative, like I get punched or something. But so far, it's been like good to hold ground and not just cower. And it doesn't mean I don't listen. I do, actually, as was the case in one example of the camp where people surrounded me and demanded I delete what I just had recorded. And I didn't want to because it was a real raw look of a fight broke out right in front of me. And a guy had a big knife. And he happened to be the guy I was interviewing. He gets up and chases after a guy who has a big old knife. I mean, it must have been a foot-long blade. And I get all of it on camera. And I get surrounded soon after it died down. Nothing happened. They just kind of went around a tent like this.
Yeah.
And nothing happened from it. I think it was just show. I don't know. But they're like, you're not... They worried I was going to turn around and throw it on YouTube. And then the police would be down there and they'd shut the camp down. And they didn't want that. So they're like, we got to protect our community. Delete that. And they reached in my pocket, tried to grab my phone and everything. And I eventually deleted it. And then going back the next day, I remember one of the people who surrounded me were like, dude, you got balls. And like, that's a good thing. He was being a jerk at the time. I thought he was. He was being at least attacking me. But that was good. I think I gained a little bit of respect there, and that's kind of, you have to hold your ground a little bit there, so you got to make the film, too.
Yeah, and you got to have the respect of the people around you. Mm-hmm.
How many times did you go to the camp throughout the whole film?
Probably 20 times.
Wow. Sweet.
Yeah. I actually work for a company near there. I do some marketing work for them.
Okay.
And, so I got kind of a day job, too.
There you go. As do we, man.
Office job.
But that is so cool that you are... I mean, your side hustle is filming this documentary, going to the wall at night or during the day, however you want to say, and then balancing your day job, all an absolute challenge. And, speaking of the challenge aspect, especially with us, the Back Pocket, we grow our podcast network and we grow guest to guest through the challenges of our podcast guests, such as yourself. So do you have anybody that you would like to see on the podcast that's in your network?
Tell me a little bit about what kind of guests you have on.
So that's a tough question for Back Pocket because we have pretty much anybody on, but a lot of it is associated with creatives, entrepreneurs, athletes, people that in general are, finding something that they love to do or are having success and happiness doing what they love to do. I would say those kind of people. If that's specific enough.
Yeah, it is. I feel terrible drawing a blank because I know people. Well, you could have James Cross on. I bet he'd come on. He's the guy in my movie who runs Natives Against Heroin.
Yeah.
And okay, this thing about him right here might want you to have him on. This one fact right here. This guy goes to reservations in, I know he's done this throughout Wisconsin. I think he does it in Minnesota too, but regardless, he'll go on reservations where life is rough, right? Or where there's a lot of drug use and people are dealing and this and that. And he'll go up with his phone recording live and he'll knock on the door of the drug house and say, get out of here. Like, we don't want you here. And he'll go right up to the door of these places selling drugs, these drug houses.
Wow.
And he'll tell them to leave. And then they'll sit outside the house and say, hey, we don't want you in our neighborhood. You're destroying our communities. Like when I heard he did that, I was just like, wow, you guys are like you guys are on the battlefront. Like this is amazing. Like I don't know of any other group doing anything like that.
James Cross,
Natives
Awesome.
Against Heroin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet.
And then the other, to get to the African American community too, which I've also done work with, is VJ Smith.
Okay.
So VJ Smith is much he's better known than James Cross because Natives Against Heroin hasn't been around that long, but VJ Smith, he's been on the news a lot of times, probably national broadcast, not just local. He's gotten awards from mayors. He's worked with the Minneapolis police a lot. He's the president of Mad Dads, which is kind of the equivalent of Natives Against Heroin for the African American community. But they're more about patrolling the inner city, making sure that the people, like, they'll encounter a group of kids on the corner, teenagers, and be like, hey guys, what are you up to tonight, you know? And these are a bunch of OGs. They all dress in green and they drive a big green van around, and so they're known, and I think they got the respect of everywhere they go. They just they try to get their youth to get back on the right track if they're off track a little bit.
Ooh.
And these are guys who've all been there, done that, and they're there to tell the young kids, hey, there's a better way. Don't make the same mistakes I did. And there's a lot of tough love, and there's a lot of coaching, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of empowerment. I actually sat in on one of their sessions a couple of winters ago where there were like 6 or 7 teenagers who had all gotten in trouble. They were all in the juvenile system. And these handful of these guys, we'll call them Mad Dads, you know, these mentors, they checked in with all these boys, young men, and some of them were struggling. Some of them needed some encouragement. Some of them needed a talking to. And these guys were there to do that. You know, these boys may not have had that in their lives thus far.
Mm-hmm.
Had an older guy who cared, a big brother or father figure, I don't know. But they had more than one in that very room. And to watch these, you know, young men that might be more brash and braggadocious and cocky, as so many young men are, but in that room they were humbled. They were, yes sir, yeah, you know, and
Yeah.
It's like, wow, I'm watching growth right before my eyes. Like this is great. Like it's kind of it's a similar empowerment approach, I think, to how the struggles in these communities can be alleviated one life at a time. So VJ Smith, Mad Dads.
Sounds like an awesome guy to get on. Both those guys.
That would be two. I actually, going on that vein of thought, I have more, but we'll start with those two.
Perfect.
All right.
Challenge
Sweet.
accepted. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
But this brings us to our final question.
Sure.
You guys good? Awesome. Last question is, what did you learn today? A simple question from the moment that you woke up to when we're having this conversation.
Okay, well, one thing I learned, I moved out near Lake Minnetonka, and my buddy Nathan came out to see me today. He's in the city. My life is in Minneapolis, so I live a half hour west now. But I like quiet. I like nature. And I went to the Carver County Park Reserve, and there's an archery, like, what?
Station?
Yeah,
Shoot
well,
around?
like there's like targets everywhere. There's like this,
what would that be called?
like
Little
you can do like
campus.
this
A range.
These yeah,
A
it's
range.
an archery. Thank you, archery range.
An
These archery drills.
range.
You can go up these steps and you can shoot these like animal targets, you know.
Yeah.
But the coolest thing is, we were just walking on one of these paths, and we encountered this river that actually is a culvert underneath the road, and on the one side it kind of widens out, and then it narrows into this like swampy area before it goes into a bigger lake. But where the creek kind of gets wide, about the size of maybe 2 or 3 of these rooms, we saw like, you know, a whole bunch of, it was shallow, so we saw like a whole bunch of carp that were like this long and this fat, just these huge meaty suckers. And then there was a ton of sunfish, there was largemouth bass, there was northern pike, and of course tons of minnows too. And they were all in this like shallow pool of running water.
Yo.
And I just saw this like 3 or 4 hours ago before coming here. I was like, dude, where am I? Like, this is like a little slice of Garden of Eden here.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it.
Why isn't anyone fishing?
Well, I did see like a couple of lures and some old fishing lines, so people have tried it. I mean, I can imagine you could catch all kinds of things in that little
Like
spot.
a reservoir.
So there's that. And then the other thing I learned pertinent to this podcast or related to this is this podcast is awesome, and that there are 3 awesome creators in here doing work with day jobs. You guys all have day jobs?
Yeah.
Ty's in school, but we have day jobs.
All right. So to see that, like that extra effort, that extra mile, that extra passion, like pour over into something outside of the 9 to 5 or whatever it is that you do, I just love seeing that. And I really appreciated you guys as examples for me, and then your own reinforcement of supporting the work that I do.
Yeah.
Because I don't know a lot of creators, you know, and so I don't know. You don't always know what you're doing, especially if you're going out on a limb and doing something on your own.
Yeah.
You don't know if like, what am I doing going with my? I literally shot the movie with this, by the way, right?
Oh.
So
I
I'm
didn't
going
realize
out.
that.
I'm going out to the 10th city, and I'm using my phone, and I'm like, what am I doing? You know, it's so easy to doubt yourself and stuff like that. So to get encouragement from you fellas means a lot. Thank you.
Hell yeah, dude.
Love that, Brandon. Thank you for that. I had no idea you shot that on your phone. That's incredible.
After I broke one, then
Speaks
I
about
got
your
this one.
wherewithal. Even more so.
Resourceful.
Very resourceful.
Yeah. Plus, I will say, just a tip, if you want to interview people and you want to keep it as low-key as possible, you really can't beat the phone.
Yeah, just a little-
Well, even if you show it to them, you know, and that's ideal. Hidden camera stuff is dicey. It's just so much less intrusive than having some big old
Rig,
camera, you
yeah.
know, some rig with a mic. Yeah, that just, hey, how you doing? And you both forget about it in no time, and you're just having a conversation.
Just like this, man.
Just like this.
Just like this.
I forgot all about this mic in front of my face. Yeah, crossed
Hey.
my eyes.
But hey, you were one hell of a podcast unpacking a story that I think everybody needs to hear. So thank you for everything you're doing. Thanks for a hell of a podcast, brother.
You bet.
That's a wrap.
Just a step away.